Good morning, everyone, and a very warm welcome to today's webinar, Emerging Carbon Markets in Southeast Asia, the Cases of Vietnam and Indonesia, jointly organized by the Vietnam Studies Program and the Climate Change in Southeast Asia Program at ISEAS Yusof Ishak Institute. I'm Jia Hui, your MC for today. Before we begin, I would like to go over a few housekeeping matters. Firstly, please note that this webinar is not under the Chatham House rule and the recording will be uploaded to YouTube after the event. Next, if you encounter any technical issues, please use the chat function to reach out to our technical support team. To ask questions to the speakers, please use the Q&A function, stating your name and affiliation together with your question, as well as which speaker you would like to pose your question to. You can send in your questions at any time. Lastly, if you would like to stay informed on our future activities, do sign up for updates at the links which I will be sharing in the chat box. Without further ado, I would like to introduce our moderator for the session. Dr. Christopher Len is Visiting Senior Fellow and Co-Coordinator at the Climate Change in Southeast Asia Program here at ISEAS Yusof Ishak Institute. I will now invite him to begin the webinar. Dr. Len, please.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar titled Emerging Carbon Markets in Southeast Asia, the Cases of Vietnam and Indonesia. My name is Christopher Len. I'm a Visiting Senior Fellow and Co-Coordinator of the Climate Change in Southeast Asia Program at the ISEAS Yusof Ishak Institute. This event is jointly organized by the Vietnam Studies Program and the Climate Change in Southeast Asia Program. Welcome to our webinar on emerging carbon markets in Southeast Asia today. We'll explore key regional trends before focusing on the latest developments shaping carbon markets in Vietnam and Indonesia. We'll examine their unique policy approaches, evolving market structures, and the ongoing process towards achieving both climate and economic goals. We are privileged to have three distinguished speakers, each of whom will speak for 15 minutes. Our first speaker is Mr. Björn Fondén, Manager of International Policy, Lead for Asia Pacific at the International Emissions Trading Association. He will lay the regional context by presenting on the growth of carbon markets in Southeast Asia. We will then move to country case studies. We have Ms. Pera Malinda Sihite, CEO of No Carbon, as second speaker. She will present on the topic of Indonesia's green economy, looking at carbon trading, market, and regulation. Our third and final speaker is Ms. Hanh Dang, co-founder and managing director of Energy and Environment Consultancy JSC, also known in short for VNEEC. She will present on the establishment of domestic carbon markets in Vietnam, looking at the latest developments and key challenges. So let's begin with Mr. Björn Fondén. Björn, the floor is yours. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. And thank you so much for inviting me. I think this is a very important topic, and I look forward to sharing a bit of an overview of carbon market development across the region. So I hope you can see my slides well. And I just want to start by setting the scene and saying that we are living in unprecedented times. This does not come as something new to most listeners, but the observed changes that we have seen in the climate over the last 2,000 years is beyond anything we have ever seen in human history. For the first time, we have crossed 420 parts per million of CO2 in the atmosphere, the highest of over 800,000 years. And we have seen median temperature levels increasing by over 1.2 degrees since pre-industrial levels. 2024, last year itself, was the hottest year ever recorded since the record keeping began in 1880. And we also know from a previous report that came out just recently by the ISEAS Yusof Ishak Institute that climate change and extreme weather events is now billed as Southeast Asia region's top challenge. Now, this matters because the emissions in Asia are growing rapidly and now represent more than half of global CO2 emissions. As you can see on the graph to the right, emissions in Asia, and particularly in China, and recently in India and other major Asian economies, have grown rapidly. And this region represents, therefore, a critical need to decarbonize at the same time as supporting sustainable development. In the last years, we have also seen an increasing number of net zero targets, both from nations, from regions, from cities, and from companies, now representing more than half of global GDP and a majority of the world's population being covered by net zero targets. Now, whilst we see this coverage increasing, we know that the countries and companies do not yet have a clear pathway for how to reach them. And that's where carbon markets come into the picture. We also see that these net zero targets have not yet translated into clear and near-term policies and actions that put us on a pathway to achieving the goals of the Paris Agreement and safeguarding our climate. And the recent IEA report has highlighted that stronger ambition is needed in most countries' nationally determined contributions, NDCs, to align them with their own net zero pledges. And this year is critical because 2025 is the year where countries have been requested as part of the Paris Agreement to update and present their new NDCs that will run until 2035, their new climate targets. And so today we're focused on carbon markets. Why? Because carbon markets can allow for increased ambition by lowering mitigation costs, and they can enable net zero by helping to address residual emissions in hard to abate sectors by using international markets. And we'll explain more about how this works and what this means for countries and companies in the region. Now, IETA, together with the University of Maryland, produced some research on this that have actually shown that Article 6 of the Paris Agreement, which sets out the rules for international carbon markets, could deliver up to $250 billion a year in savings by 2030, when countries use Article 6 to support the implementation of their NDCs versus implementing them independently without the use of international markets. And if those cost savings are reinvested into additional mitigation, we could actually reduce an additional 5 gigatons of CO2 emissions per year. And by 2050, this market value could reach up to $1 trillion a year. So this really represents a significant financial market, and in that sense, also a significant opportunity to raise ambition in the achievement of our climate targets. So that's really what we do at IETA. As Christopher mentioned, I am the International Policy Manager for IETA based here in Singapore. And our role as an industry association that was set up in 1999 following the adoption of the Kyoto Protocol is to be the trusted business voice on market-based climate solutions. We now have over 300 business members across the world that represent the entire carbon market landscape, from project developers to emitters to traders and enablers. And the goal is really to empower the private sector to engage in these markets by establishing effective, clear, and coherent policies, and thereby making net zero possible. I won't go through all the logos on this slide. This is just to show some of our member companies, and I'm sure you may recognize a number of them. But when we speak about carbon markets, it's easy to get confused because out there we have a number of different market instruments. And I was asked by Dr. Len to briefly share our view on what do we refer to when we speak about carbon markets. So in my view, there's three key instruments that we are talking about. Number one is domestic compliance markets or emissions trading schemes, ETS, which are domestic schemes regulated by governments where they, in most cases, set emission caps for companies in different heavy emitting sectors that they will need to achieve. If they overachieve, they can trade allowances and sell them to other companies who may have difficulties in achieving their targets or may find it cheaper to procure allowances from other companies. But the key is that you have a fixed cap and a clear target for reducing your emissions. On the other side, you have voluntary carbon markets, or the VCM, which essentially came up on the sidelines of the Kyoto Protocol to help and private sector financing into new types of nature conservation, restoration, and emission reduction activities. Now, voluntary markets, on the other hand, are in most cases not governed by governments and are instead governed by independent crediting programs and standards bodies such as Vera or Gold Standard. And participants in the market are mostly companies who have voluntarily set their own net zero or carbon neutrality targets, and they use carbon credits to support that ambition, especially in the case of hard to abate sectors such as steel, cement, or some energy companies. And finally, we have international markets under Article 6 of the Paris Agreement, which again is really an opportunity for countries to trade with each other to support the achievement of their NDCs. But it also shows a pathway for companies who want to participate in international markets that are regulated by the UNFCCC, the UN Climate Change Secretariat, and by the countries and parties that set criteria for quality and environmental integrity. So these three buckets, the compliance ETS, the verified or voluntary carbon markets, and the international carbon markets are all growing rapidly. We have seen how new markets are shaping up on the compliance side, how the voluntary carbon markets have introduced new standards and thousands of projects around the world. And in more recent years, how Article 6 of the Paris Agreement has been operationalized following the adoption of the rules at Glasgow and then in Baku at COP29 last year. Now, if we look at emissions trading in numbers, the International Carbon Action Partnership, ICAP, just came out with their new report 2 weeks ago, which explains the role and coverage of domestic emissions trading systems. So right now we have 38 ETS in force that covers almost 20% of global emissions. And almost 1/3 of the world's population lives under an ETS in force, meaning that jurisdictions making up about 58% of global GDP are using emissions trading. And of course, the major examples include the EU, China, New Zealand, and many more. Looking at the map, we can see some of these existing emissions trading schemes that you can see in blue. But more importantly, we also see the new ones that are under development or under consideration in dark green and light green. And zooming in a bit onto this region in Southeast Asia, we see that Singapore is the first country in the region implementing a compliance carbon pricing scheme, a carbon tax and offset scheme which allows international credits using Article 6 of the Paris Agreement to be used as offsets against the carbon tax. In Indonesia, we saw the introduction of an ETS for the coal power sector in 2023, which Pera will go into details later. In Vietnam, we are expecting the pilot ETS to hopefully kick off by this year, and we look forward to hearing Han sharing updates on the same. In Malaysia, a carbon tax is looking to be implemented next year and an ETS under consideration, and Thailand on a similar pathway. Philippines is also considering the development of an ETS, and regionally under the ASEAN Secretariat, there is a common carbon framework under development by some business associations that looks to link these markets together over time. So you see that there is really a lot of action on the ground in this region, and this has significant implications both for the countries and for the companies active in ASEAN. If we look on the voluntary carbon markets, you can see that whilst the growth has increased over time in terms of project investments by region, the largest share, if you look at the red bar in 2022, is actually happening in this region in East Asia and Pacific, where the largest project investment is taking place. And a lot of that has recently been focused on nature-based solutions, including REDD+ project, afforestation and reforestation, but we're also seeing an increasing shift towards removals type of projects, such as biochar or innovative technological removals. So the Asia-Pacific region is really taking a lead, and also historically, we can see that on the Verra registry, 68% of issuing carbon projects is actually coming from the APAC region. Finally, on Article 6 implementation, Asia is also taking a lead, with Singapore, Japan, and South Korea being the global leaders on the buy side. And in this chart, which is actually developed by us at IETA, and you can find it online using the link, on the left side, you will see the buyers, and Singapore is really number one in terms of the bilateral agreements that have been signed to purchase carbon credits or ITMOs from other countries. And on the right side, you will see the host countries. And notably, you will find that Thailand was actually the first country to sell internationally transferred mitigation outcomes, which is Article 6 carbon credits, to Switzerland in December 2023. And since then, countries such as Malaysia, Indonesia, Cambodia, Vietnam, Philippines, and Laos have all started engaging in Article 6 because they see this opportunity. So what is the challenge here? Well, governments, they need to develop holistic strategies for how they engage with these markets. They need to think about what should be covered by a compliance emissions trading scheme or a carbon tax. What projects should I allow to move forward in the verified carbon market, voluntary carbon market, whilst ensuring integrity? And what types of mitigation activities should I authorize under Article 6 of the Paris Agreement? Because when you authorize credits to be sold under Article 6 and be used for another country's NDC or other international mitigation purposes, such as the International Scheme for Aviation, CORSIA, they need to make a corresponding adjustment, i.e. they cannot longer count those emission reductions to their own NDC achievement. So for that, they need to think about the marginal abatement costs of various actions. they need to consider all sources of international finance, not just carbon financing, but also interactions with other types of climate financing. I think importantly, also considering the impact of the CBAM, the EU's carbon border adjustment mechanism, which we see are really pushing countries in this region to implement their own carbon pricing systems. They need to develop a clear NDC strategy and Article 6 authorization framework and consider impacts on investments, private sector competitiveness, different groups in society, including indigenous peoples, and sustainable development. And finally, ensure coordination among relevant ministries and agencies. So this really requires vast capacity building needs. And I think we'll hear more about Vietnam and Indonesia and the challenges that have been facing these markets. But this comes as new to many governments in this region. And so at AITA, we hope to help build capacity on carbon markets. And we work very closely with a number of these countries in the region and globally to provide resources, advocacy, and workshops, especially through our business partnership for market implementation, or BPMI, where we work with the emerging economies to support effective carbon markets. And we also lead a private sector working group globally for the Article 6 implementation partnership to enhance the understanding of Article 6. And finally, here in Singapore, we collaborate with the government, the Economic Development Board, to host the Singapore Carbon Market Alliance to foster access to international carbon credits, or ICCs. So if you're interested in any of these resources, don't hesitate to reach out to me or find them on our website. And finally, just to conclude, I would like to also send out an invitation to all of you who may be listening today and interested to learn more about carbon markets in this region, to join us in Bangkok in Thailand from 8 to 10 of July, where we are hosting our Asia Climate Summit. We expect around 800 people, so very much hoping to see you there. And with this, I will close and hand back to the moderator. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Björn, for sharing with us your presentation and also letting us have a better understanding of the regional developments. Thank you also for mentioning the State of Southeast Asia survey that was recently released in 2025. I have asked my colleague to add a link in the chat box to the report so that the audience can refer to the report in full if they are interested. And separately, at the Climate Change in Southeast Asia program, for your information, we also have a climate report that is published that has been published since 2020. In that survey, we cover the attitudes of Southeast Asian general public towards climate change, food security, and energy transition. So that report was released in September 2024 and is called the Southeast Asia Climate Outlook Survey. We will add a link to that report as well. So thank you very much for your presentation. Now we have Ms. Pera Malinda Sihite, who will take us through what's happening in Indonesia. Pera, please go ahead.
Thank you, Dr. Chris. Thank you so much for inviting me, ISEAS, for this webinar. I'm Pera from Indonesia, and I'm representing No Carbon. We are a carbon project developer from Indonesia. And I will just run through about my understanding and insight about what happened currently with Indonesia green economy. So just quick update. So Indonesia used to have like one ministry to manage related of carbon credit, which is Ministry of Forestry and Environment. But per 21st October 2024, we decided to separate these two ministries. So currently, all of related to the carbon will be handled under Ministry of Environment, while Ministry of Forestry will focusing on doing all the stuff related to the forestry. So how does Indonesia map out the regulation? There are many regulation has been laid out by our government in order to make the infrastructures and the implementation of carbon credits in Indonesia, but there are two main regulations that might be more influential that we are currently used as the benchmark, and also the details that I'm going to discuss today. So under our presidential regulation, we already have some kind of roadmap about how we're going to achieve our national determined contribution target. And then under Ministry Regulation of Environment and Forestry, we also already have all of the details regarding the implementation and technical procedures of our carbon economic value. So Indonesia NDC target has been laid out for the target of 2030 and 2060s. Let's discuss about the nearest one, which is NDC 2030. Based on our baseline from the 5 sectors of emission contributing in our country, Indonesia focusing to reduce 31.89% of emission reduction without the help of international fundings, but with the help of the international funding, we can achieve further, which is 43.2%. So it's based on unconditional target and conditional target. So if we get more help, depend on the funding that we get from international, we can increase our emission reduction by 2030. And the 5 sectors that we gonna reduce emission comes from forestry, energy, agriculture, industrial, and waste management. And that in order to achieve the target to reduce our NDC is we need at least 258 billion to achieve the target for 2030. This is quite big, and Indonesia also already laid out about how much billion of dollar that sectorally we need from the 5 sectors that I mentioned to you earlier. And then how do we can achieve this number in terms of like the implementation? So we also already have the mechanisms. The 3 mechanisms that I want to discuss further is the carbon trading, the result-based payment or RBP, and the carbon levy or carbon tax. I will not discuss about carbon tax yet because it has not been implemented in Indonesia. The discussion is still going on. So I will focus on carbon trading and result-based payment first. So in order to support the carbon trading, we launch our own carbon exchange. It's called IDX Carbon. So it has been running and launched by September 2023. And we have 4 mechanisms of trading, the auction, regular, negotiated, and marketplace. Currently, I believe that the market is being published as only regular, but it's gonna be like getting more developed in the futures. And in order to do the carbon trading, we don't have any kind of limitation locally or domestically if you want to buy as the entity or individual in these platforms of carbon exchange. But if we want to transfer to the international countries or international entity, we need to use the surplus principle where Indonesia only permit the sale of carbon credit internationally only if it is a surplus beyond our target of NDC. I will discuss later about this. So until now, January 2025, the carbon IDX Carbon Exchange has been doing very good. They already exchanged like 1.56 million tons of CO2, which value around $3.79 million US. And this is like 3 examples of the project that has been running. Majority is renewable energy, but I believe that within several months ahead, the carbon trading for nature-based projects such as forestry will be also published under IDX Carbon. So not only the carbon exchange, in order to support the carbon trading, Indonesia also build their own standard. So Björn already mentioned about several international standards like Pera, Gold Standard, etc. But Indonesia has their own standard. We call it SRMPPI, System Registry Nasional Perubahan Iklim. So this is the looks of it. It's the same with the international standard. It has the mechanism of the MRV, how every carbon project need to register under SRMPPI, where we're going to do the planning, the implementation, the reporting, and the validations. And the process is also quite the same with international standard, where we need to register the data, build the PDD, and then doing the validation, and then implement the projects and getting the verification in order to get the certification of emission reductions. So the question is, if we have our own carbon exchange, if we have our own standard, how do we gonna transfer our carbon internationally? So the question is being like a very debatable before, like since 2021 until now, but Indonesia already making some kind of methodology in order for us to solve that using the mutual recognition arrangement. It means that we're gonna have like the agreement with countries, and if we already have an agreement with the country, we will recognize each other carbon credits, methodology, and registry under the defined rules. So there are gonna be like the cooperative approach where countries can transfer the carbon credits, and then there's gonna be corresponding adjustment, make sure that there is no double counting between the countries, because if Indonesia already transferred to specific countries, then Indonesia need to reduce that number in their own NDC number. And then also there is an integrity and transparency. So these past years has been really progressive for our mutual recognized agreement, because in 28 October 2024, Indonesia and Japan signed our first mutual recognition arrangement for bilateral carbon trading. So what does it mean? So it means that there is a recognition and implementation between Japan and Indonesia. So Japan has their own mechanism, it's called GCM, while Indonesia, we have the SRMPPI or SPAE system. So under this, both of these standard and market can transfer their credit between Japan and Indonesia. And then there's going to be carbon credit sharing and registry. We were going to do the corresponding adjustment to prevent the double counting. And there is also the cooperation and oversight, make sure that there is like ongoing consultation, especially related to the forestry and waste sectors, but there is also duration. So the MRA between Japan and Indonesia is valid until 31st December 2030 with possibility of extension. Probably it's gonna be changing several rules that might be related to the future market. Not only with the Japan, Indonesia also has the arrangement with Pera, Gold Standard, and Plan Vivo, which is really good because the collaboration has been discussed and has their own joint task force in order to support and comply Indonesia carbon trading regulation. The current status is currently Indonesia and the international standard trying to finalize the MRA by May 2025. We're also waiting for that. So it means that the methodology from this international standard in Indonesia can be acknowledged by each others, and then we can also transfer the credit as well between the standards. And then the second one, I mentioned that there is three mechanisms of carbon economic value in Indonesia: the carbon trading, the RBP or result-based payment, and carbon tax. So the last one that I want to discuss is the result-based payment. So this is currently the implementation of result-based payment using RADD in Indonesia. So the potential of RBP is 431 million US dollars, but this is something that need to be implemented in order Indonesia to get the money. We have several programs under a specific area, for example, in Jambi with Biocarbon Fund, and then we also have a program with Norway, and then there is a FCPC Carbon Fund and Green Climate Fund. I think it's already been updated by the government, but this is like my last data that I know based on Indonesia carbon market. So that's all about Indonesia green economy, about the challenge and the process of doing the green economy in Indonesia. I will discuss more during the question and answer. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Pera, for your presentation. Finally, it is the turn of Ms. Hanh Dang, who will share with us what is happening in Vietnam. Ms. Hanh Dang, the floor is yours.
State of the carbon market development in Vietnam, challenge. Yeah, please stand.
Hello, Ms. Hanh Dang, are you there? We seem to not be able to get her. I think there was a problem with the internet connection. We apologize for that. Now we'll start again. She's back online. Ms. Hanh Dang, welcome back. Yes.
Yeah. Sorry.
Please, please can you restart again? No worries. Thank you.
Yeah. So good morning, everybody. So my pleasure to be at the event to share and update you on the latest development of the carbon market in Vietnam. Can you hear me clearly? Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, that's good because there's some problem previously. So please share my slide. Yeah. So my name is Hanh Dang, co-founder and managing director of the Energy and Environment Consultancy Joint Stock Company in Vietnam, VNEX. So next slide, please. Yeah. So just to start, we look at the legal foundation for the setting up of the carbon market in Vietnam. So the first time that the carbon market or carbon pricing instrument acknowledged and legalized is under the law on environmental protection in 2022. 2020, that was entered into force in 2022. And then, so under the law, there are a number of decrees and decisions of the government to implement the law and to facilitate the development of the domestic carbon market in Vietnam. The notable one you have to mention here is the government decree 06 issued in 2022, regulating the structure for the carbon market in Vietnam, international and domestic carbon market in Vietnam. And then maybe most of you know that the decree number 06 is under the amending and revising at the moment because of the for the implementation. Now they know that they are the lacking of the detail for a number of issues that can guide and help for the operation of the domestic carbon market as well as international carbon market in Vietnam. So it's under the amending that heavily changed the structure and the detail of the decree. And then to support the decree, that also the decision of the government and also the line ministry. So we can mention here the decision, latest decision number 13 issued in last year, with the list of the facility that have to report, that have the obligation to report and to conduct the GHG mitigation activity and GHG inventory activities. And then also by the beginning of this year, that the decision of the Prime Minister 232 that approving the scheme on the establishing and developing the carbon market in Vietnam. So this decision 232 is mainly detailed on the timeline to development of the carbon market in Vietnam, and also provide the detail on the tasks of the line ministry and agency who are in charge of the operating and also developing the domestic carbon market in Vietnam. Next slide, please. So here, what are the components of the domestic carbon market in Vietnam? You know, for the, thanks to the Björn presentation, you know, for the to reduce greenhouse gas emission, the government can use different instruments. There are the two key instruments, is namely the non-market instrument. That this is the, for example, the requirement of the government of Vietnam for the reporting on GHG inventory and also GHG mitigation activity. That the first one is due in March, in the end of March this year. And then also the capacity and then technology and financial support. So it's fall under the non-market instrument. And then for the to mitigate GHG emission in the most cost-efficient way for the society, then the government imposed a carbon pricing instrument. That in Vietnam we apply the tradable mechanism. Is including emission trading system that will be pilot from this year until 2027 initially, but now it's extended under the decision 232 to until 2028. And then also credit mechanism is also have the same pilot phase as the ETS. And then for the non-tradable carbon pricing tool in Vietnam that haven't considered it at, because of the carbon tax in apply in Vietnam is required the approval of the National Assembly. That will take time, so it's not in line with the national determination contribution targets to reduce GHG emission by 2030. So this is why the carbon tax is not considered in, until now, but maybe in the future due to the impact of the CBAM, the government may consider the carbon tax for the sectors that are not yet covered under the tradable mechanism. Yeah, next slide, please. Yeah, for the carbon market in Vietnam, the commodity here, we have two major commodities. This is emission allowance under the ETS, and then carbon credit from domestic mechanism that has been defined, and carbon credit from international mechanism that namely under the revision of the Degree 6 is a CDM, JCM, and Article 6 of the Paris Agreement. So the details are not yet developed by the government. And then we have the market participant defined in the articles, in the Decree 06, that three major market participants. Here is a facility that listed in the decision of the decision 13 is, and then also the organization and who implement the domestic or international carbon credit program that for credit trading only, and then the organization and individual who participate in the carbon credit investment and trading activity. So this is the carbon credit only. And for the ETS, only the facility, that installation that are in the list that allow to participate in the ETS. So for the roadmap, as I mentioned, the pilot will be from 2025 until 2028, and then the official operation will start from 2029. And for carbon exchange, for the trading of GHG allowance and carbon credit to offset under the ETS, it had to be conducted under the official trading platform operated by the government. Here is assigned to the Ministry of Finance. And agency in charge, we focus on the most important one is the Ministry of Natural Resources and Environment, who now just changed the name to the Ministry of Agriculture and Environment. I still have to get used to this name. And then the Ministry of Finance, this is the Ministry of Agriculture and Environment will be in charge of operate the carbon market. And then Ministry of Finance will be in charge of set up the carbon exchange platform. And other line ministry in charge of the sectors also participate in this set up of the carbon market in Vietnam. Next slide, please. And yeah, before going to slide, just this slide just mentioned that for the previous slide, there are the two important study conducted in Vietnam at the moment, financed by the ETT, that study on the impact of the commodity here, two commodity in namely the ETS allowance, and then also the carbon credit in the impact on the social economic in Vietnam, and also the study to support the Ministry of Finance to establish the carbon exchange platform. Yeah, so here this slide we highlight the sector and facility are listed in this season 13. That there are the 2,166 facilities that are listed in this season that are mandatory to report on duty inventory, and then also on the result on the plan and result of implementation of GHG mitigation activities. So there are also the criteria for the selecting the facility to be included in this list. So this increased from about 1,912 facility in the previous decision. So every 2 years, this list will be updated and will be issued by the Prime Minister. So only the facility listed in this list will be participate in the ETS. Not all of them, but the one are selected to participate in the ETS will be eligible to participate in the ETS and also the carbon trading platform. Yeah, next slide, please. So here, just give you the roadmap of GHG emission inventory and mitigation at the facility level, because it's important for us to remember this deadline, because it has impact on the setup of the ETS. So we have the 2025. This is the first time that the facility had to report on the GHG inventory. So it's by the end of March, but we haven't seen the result yet. So I don't know quality of the data and seeing how good they are, and then whether they are sufficient to establish the database for the ETS decision making. So it's still under like process of the collecting the data and validation by the government. And then by by the end of also this year, the first time the facility had to submit the mitigation plan. It means that first they conduct the GHG inventory, and then they had to submit the plan to reduce GHG emission at their facilities. This is voluntary for the facilities that not included in the ETS. And then by 2027, this is first time they had to report the result of the implementation of mitigation plan. Yeah, next slide, please. So for the carbon crediting, the eligible one is now is under decision 06. Is including the domestic carbon credit and offsetting mechanism. They are not defined with the detail, only the title, but without any information for which type project and methodology apply, and other detail for the domestic carbon crediting and offsetting. So we hope that it under the revision of Decree 06, there will be further detail. And then for the bilateral and multilateral carbon crediting under Article 6 of the Paris Agreement, Article 6.2 of the Paris Agreement, Vietnam has signed the agreement MOU with the government of Singapore and Korea so far. And then we are under, I know that very intensive negotiation with Singapore to move to the next phase of implementation, at least of the pilot activity in Article 6.2 in Vietnam. And for Article 6.4, that Vietnam also under the first evaluation of the activities that we are, of the CDM activities that are eligible to transfer under the Article 6.4. So there are no guideline of the country for Article 6.4 at the moment. So at the moment, the government also had announced the plan to develop the government decree to manage the transfer of the mitigation outcome under the Article 6.2 and Article 6.4, and also to transfer for other international use. Yeah, next slide, please. Yeah, next slide, please. Yeah, so we have just to summarize that we have is for Vietnam, we have a legal framework is under play, but a lot of detail are still lacking, and still under development. So for the pilot in 2025 at the government ambitious, we see that this is still very challenging. A number of detailed challenge, for example, like technical and data issues. So you see that the first batch of data reported by the enterprises, it will come by the end of March this year, but then the government had to do all the data analysis, validate, and also like conduct the calculation to do the allocation of allowance. So that's definitely in the impact on the quality of the data and decision of the government. And then in the data collection, we heard from the facility, they have a lot of problem in collecting the data. And then there's also a lot of questions regarding the validation, how the data will be validated. And then we have the lacking of the capacity and resource, as Björn mentioned, that this is a new topic and new concept in Vietnam. So for both the government and enterprises and the community. And then also getting consensus from different stakeholders is very challenging. We know that we just heard that in the beginning of this week that the revision of the latest version of the revision of Decree 06 has been returned to the Ministry of Agriculture and Environment for improving, because of the line ministry, they disagree on the contents. And then also the consensus on the put on the mitigation of GHG, why they are also ambitious of the government for the economic growth at 2 digits. And then, for the engagement and support from industry, that the ready need of industry is quite low. And then we also heard a lot in our event for the concern over the transparency and compliance costs of the industry. And overall, we see that the legal framework and institutional framework are in place, but then for the market operation and oversight, they are lacking a lot of detail. So we concern over the size of transaction may be negligible. The liquidity of the market is very low. And then there are no detail of how the government intervenes in the markets. So if any like issues, so that still require a lot of work from the government at the moment. Yeah. Next slide, please. Yeah, next slide, please. Yeah. So just very short about us that the next we founded in September 2006. So far, we have more than 175 projects is registered under different mechanisms like the voluntary and the CDM as beyond highlights. And then we have more than 15 million carbon credit issues. And then we also engage in a lot of policy advisory at the moment, especially the two important advisories that I just mentioned before on the impact of the assessment of the impact of the carbon market on the social and economic in Vietnam, and also for the support for the Ministry of Finance to set up the carbon trading platform. So please follow us at our website for the update about that, the result of our study. Yeah. So thank you very much. Next, the final slide. I just saw our website, so you can follow us on our website and for further information. So thank you very much. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Chi Han, for the insights into Vietnam. Now we have come to the Q&A segment. We now open the floor to questions by the audience. We have about 35 minutes and we actually have some questions lined up already. So I'll start with a question for all of you. It's asked by Thuong from National Zheng Zhi University in Taiwan. The question is, how are divergent policy frameworks and institutional capacities within ASEAN affecting one member's ability to engage in cross-border carbon market mechanisms under Article 6 of the Paris Agreement? So maybe Björn, you would like to go first, and then after that, I will pose the question to Pera, followed by Hanh.
Sure. Thank you very much. And thank you for the question. It's a very pertinent one because we do see a lot of fragmentation right now in the market. As we hear in the cases of both Indonesia and Vietnam, there are fundamentally different approaches taken to their participation in both domestic and international carbon markets. And the same applies for every country in this region is taking their own approach. Now, this is, of course, necessary because each of the countries under the Paris Agreement, not just the developed countries and Annex 1 parties, have set their own nationally determined contributions, and they themselves need to identify how they are going to achieve them, including which mitigation actions to take, which financing sources are available, and with that also what types of policy instruments, including carbon pricing and carbon markets, can be utilized to support them in reaching their NDC. Now, the issue with each country taking different views and implementing different standards, infrastructures, and registries is, of course, that you are hampering the liquidity and interoperability of the market. And ultimately, if we are to scale carbon markets, we do need credits and ITMOs under Article 6 to be as fungible as possible, meaning they are issued using similar methodologies, similar quality criteria, and are possible to trade internationally and to be used for as large use case as possible. This is really what will drive demand and liquidity in the market, and what will also help to scale up financing towards the developing countries. So that's my response.
Yeah, additional point from my side is just want to highlight from the other for the rest of the audience. So under Article 6 of the Paris Agreement, Article 6.2 allows the country to track the carbon reduction via bilateral. So just for the background, I totally agree with what Björn said. What I'm seeing is like every country has their own motive or purpose or goals. Like for Indonesia itself, I couldn't talk about the other countries, but I can talk a little bit about Indonesia. So we are very opportunity driven. So we want to reduce our emission, but we also want to monetize the emission reduction through the trade itself. We already quite clear enough about our path on how we can reduce our NDC target, NDC emission target, as well as how much budget that we need in order to reduce these emissions through international funding. I think when it comes about Asian members, it's about how we can actually support each other in order to have more regional harmonization, because currently we have a different methodology, different MRP system, different legal frameworks. Some country might be more advanced than the rest, which also leads to the uneven access to the finance. So some country might have more access to finance. For example, Japan, because Japan, they are like one of the leader in terms of like Asian market of carbon credit. But the less developed country will be like excluded or undercompensated if we don't actually harmonize as the region to work together. And then also, it might also related to the market fragmentations and opportunity of leadership, because I noticed in the Björn presentation, 68%, if I'm not mistaken, of the carbon projects come from Asia, basically. So, but we have the opportunity to lead the carbon market as the region, Asian, that we can have a better regional harmonization with the shared protocol, MRA, and then building the economic platform in order to work together. So in conclusion, basically, there's 3 challenges that we need to discuss about Asian if we want to move forward, which is the regional alignment, the capacity building, and also the international trade happen between our region. Thank you.
Hanh?
Yeah. Can I just add, I totally agree with Pera that that the three challenge that we should we should address for the harmonize of the ASEAN region in the carbon market. But I just want to emphasize that the starting point of each country is totally different. Like you start with the duty mitigation in the national determined contribution differently with different approach, different targets. So it's to talk about the unified system like in the EU ETS, I think is not possible. But then, of course, we can collaborate in a number of issues. And then, as I totally agree with Pera that the three main points that we can use at the starting point. And then the first one is can focus on sharing experience and capacity building in the regions. I think this is the thing we can do right now. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. I have a second round of questions. This one is with regards to Indonesia and Vietnam. So to Pera and to Hanh, can you please highlight the potential and specific implementing challenges in Indonesia and Vietnam for the steel and cement sector to utilize carbon pricing mechanisms in the decarbonization pathway? So we're looking at a very sector-specific question for the two countries. Yeah.
I
Pera,
can
would you like
talk
to
a
go
little bit. Yeah, I can go first about that. So because I work with the steel and cement industry about this issue a little bit. So I just want to highlight this concept of NDC target. So if I can share it my side, this one. Like I mentioned to you, there's 5 sectors that currently Indonesia working on to reduce the emissions. So if you are talking about steel and cement industry, it is included under industrial processes and product uses. So the goal here is to how we can implement and encourage the company in this sector to reduce their emission target, which is not related to the economic benefit for the company, but to achieve their emission reduction because of the regulation from the government side. So I will say that the challenge will be, first one is what is the incentive for the companies in order to follow the rules of Indonesia government in order to reduce their emission reductions. And then second, when we discuss about the methodology, the methodology of the cement industry and steel is quite specific. Majority is related to the technology implemented in the factory itself or the manufacturers. So it's gonna relate it to the costs and benefit for the companies. Most of the companies actually, especially the bigger company and the cement industry, they are currently engaged with the Ministry of Industrial. They're trying to find a way in order to, adapt their business model, adapt their operational efficiency, but as well as how they can actually implement the emission reduction using the technology needed in order to be eligible under carbon credit mechanism and the regulation of SRMPPI methodology to reduce their emission in the manufacturers. But it's also related to what Björn said, which is the capacity. Not many companies basically already have a advanced team, especially if they don't have the sustainability team. They need to have like some kind of the industrial, like the decarbonization task force in order for their workers, their new technologies, their reporting mechanism to the governments. And also from the policy sector is how can, like I mentioned, the incentive, but also it's much more into the detail of the roadmap that Indonesia government can implement it in order to build a much more sustainable emission reduction in the sectors. That's my answer.
Hanh, what about Vietnam?
Yeah, for Vietnam, we can like for the question addressed. I think two rice sector because this is two sector together with thermal power plant that are planned by the government for the pilot ETS in this year. So for the steel and cement sector, because we also engage in the supporting of the government to develop the form for collecting the data or tool for the enterprises to collect the data and to submit to the government. So I think one of the challenge I talk about first for this company to participate in the ETS, that the data quality and data collection, because this is the first time they have to do that, and then they are lacking of resource and capacity to do so, though there are a lot of training of the government on to support them. And for the steams, especially there are the totally different technologies in the steam sector in Vietnam. And then, so the guidance from the government at the moment is just at a general level. So for different technology, we have to have the very detailed guidance for the technologies, and then also different approach to calculate the benchmark for the ETS for different technology, but they are not available at the moment yet. So the concern from STEAM facility when we provide the training to them, and also the approach for the ETS allocation, they really concerned for the fares in the allocate of the allowance for the company because of different in technologies and different in the capacity of the company to do the GHG mitigation. And then for the cement company, the concern we heard from them is like most of the mitigation activity that they can conduct, they already apply. So now to change and improve the technology that can reduce GHG emissions are really challenged for them. So they are at a critical point now. If there are the further requests from the government for reducing GHG emission, because they have the crash in the manufacturing in the recent year. In last 5 years, maybe you see the wave of the new cement factory and manufacturing in Vietnam, but now a lot of them had to close down because of different reasons of the economic reason, and also I think mainly because of the economic reason. So now if the additional requirement of the government is mean that costly for them to reduce GHG emission, it impose very challenging for the cement sector. And then the cement sector, the technology also quite different. So we also have to develop the benchmark that can be justifiable for the different technologies. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. Björn, is there anything you'd like to add to this, or can I move on to the next question? Question is with regards to the steel and cement sectors and the utilization of the carbon pricing mechanism. Beyond Indonesia and Vietnam, is there any insights you can share?
Yeah, thanks. We have a lot of questions, so I'll be brief. I think just the point here is to make that this is really what an ETS allows, is to meet the targets at the lowest possible cost. So, of course, in the cement sector, you will see a few actions that can be taken at relatively low cost, especially in most developing countries. And the same applies for the steel sector. But then as you move further down the marginal abatement cost curve, you will come towards the shift toward electric arc furnaces or implementation of CCS. And most of those actions would be priced at a significantly higher carbon price than what would be possible in other sectors. So the ETS really allows to achieve the targets set by the government at lower cost. And this applies very well for cement and steel, which of course is being pushed by CBAM. This is the real reason why I think these sectors are being included in most pricing schemes right now.
Okay, thank you very much for your response. I'm going to zoom in on a specific question with regards to Indonesia. This is by somebody named Mr. Felix Tan. So to Pera, as a seller of carbon credits, what are the issues or challenges that hinder your ability to scale and market credits to foreign buyers? Second question, What is your view of the standard of MRV frameworks in Indonesia now, since it's being mentioned by foreign buyers as not aligning with international standards? So for the other two speakers, Björn and Hanh, if you guys have any additional comments on this, you can join in the conversation after Pera replies. So Pera, please.
Yeah, thank you for addressing the big elephant in the room. Actually, that's always the question for all the carbon project developers. So the first one is when we're talking about selling carbon credits. So we already stopping the selling of carbon credits internationally if the project started in 2021. So if the project before 2021, you can still sell it internationally because the regulation has not been implemented yet. But after 2021, we basically just stop international trade until Indonesia government make the infrastructures of the regulation, the roadmap, the mechanism, the mutual recognized agreements to transfer the credits between the countries, and there is no in order to make sure there is no double counting. So the challenge is basically we couldn't sell it yet until now, but like I mentioned in the slides that I shared, it has been addressed by the mechanism of our Indonesia carbon exchange market. We can still sell it domestically. So if there is no corresponding adjustment, for example, if like international entity buy under our carbon exchange, but they don't want to report it for their government, they don't need to report it as the emission reduction that is related to their carbon tax. There is no corresponding adjustment, it's fine. There is no problem with it, so you can still sell it just like usual. But if the international entity or the international government want to claim it as their NDC target, then that's the big question that happens, that it's currently being addressed by the government through the mechanism of a mutual recognized agreement. Like I mentioned, we already have one with Japan, Indonesia-Japan MRA, which means that we can now selling with Japan. So projects in Japan, projects in Indonesia, we can transfer it between the countries. The detail of mechanism will be laid out by the government itself during their implementation. But also we are working with the international standard like Pera, Gold Standard, and Plan FIFO in order to make sure that we can transfer the credit from SRMPPI, our national standard, to Pera credits, or to Gold Standard credits, or to Plan FIFO credits. Well, basically, currently still discussion with Pera only, but I guess if Pera is already being acknowledged by the government, the rest of the registry will also like have a better future agreement with Indonesia. So that's actually the second point that I mentioned, answered your second question. So when you mentioned about the MRV process, the misalignment, actually, because we currently have a discussion with Pera, meaning that we are gonna having like a standardized methodology transfers, and there is no double counting risk between these standards. So it's gonna solve the international trust issue. But one thing for sure is like our national standard is based on UNFCCC, so it's not new. And we can always modify and revise as detailed, as comprehensive as possible whenever we propose the project to Indonesia government using international standard, as long as it is approved and legalized by UNFCCC. So Indonesia want to make it as credible, as accessible as possible, but the mechanism itself needs time for us to implement it as advanced as Pera, I believe. Does that answer your question?
Yes, I think that is quite comprehensive. And I suppose if anybody else have very specific technical queries, they can also approach the presenters directly by emailing them. I have one question for Hanh. Is with regards to the application of Vietnam shipping companies with a fleet emitting GHG across the world. Does the ship's flag affect the GHG accounting? And as a trader or investor, where are the potential trading or investment opportunities to take advantage of the market inefficiency? Yeah.
Wow, that's a difficult question because I think Björn also maybe can help, because just recently that the agreement on the internationally on the shipping sectors. So at the moment, I think for the international shipping, that is not mandated to report in Vietnam at It means that if any activity that fall under the eligible methodology for the GT for carbon credit generation for the shipping that internationally available, that you can apply to generate carbon credit. But at the moment, Vietnam do not have any methodology available for the shipping, and especially international shipping are not yet like targeted by the government at the moment. So there are no guidance from the government for the carbon credit from shipping, and shipping is not under the ITS in the pilot phase at the moment. Yeah.
Björn, would you like to say something about the shipping sector?
No, I think that was comprehensive by Ms. Han. So,
Okay, so let's see. Actually, I have a question, a more general question for all the presenters. Is with regards to Trump's tariffs. So my question is, President Trump's latest tariffs on Southeast Asian countries are expected to disrupt global trade dynamics. So how might these developments impact the growth of carbon markets in the ASEAN region? And are there any potential opportunities amid the challenges? So I'd like to hear from the three speakers. Björn, would you like to go first? Then we can have Pera followed by Han.
yes, thank you. It's a very pertinent question, of course. And I must say that I followed the international negotiations. I was working for UNFCCC prior to AITA, and the impact of the US leaving the Paris Agreement and potentially also the convention, of course, has significant impacts across the world. The same can apply for all policy developments that's happening in the US, including the trade and tariff war. I think we have seen for a long time, not just recently, a move towards a more diversified and multipolar world order, especially with the growth of BRICS and introduction of new separate processes for trade, for currencies, development, and more. In this region, we know that Indonesia joined BRICS formally as a member in January this year. And I understand that both Malaysia, Thailand, and Vietnam are in consideration. So what I believe we might see, especially when it comes to Article 6 and international carbon markets, is a move towards climate clubs where aligned nations set targets and trade amongst each other with common standards and frameworks, whereas others may only trade with partners within their club. We have seen initial moves towards this from of the BRICS countries. And of course, at the macro scale, from an economic standpoint, this means the world is losing out on efficiencies of trade and cost-effective abatements. But some of this modeling I mentioned to before on Article 6, we actually explored 3 years ago the impact of having Article 6 happen within certain carbon clubs instead of an international market. And basically what it showed is that those countries not participating in the market will be losing out, but the marginal impact for those still in the market will be relatively small. So in essence, what it means is that US is out. They will lose out on a lot of opportunities. We have many American companies as part of AITA. They won't be able to participate in Article 6 as buyers or sellers of ITMOs from the US. This has a key impact. And I think for ASEAN more widely, this also means that there's an opportunity, right, to actually take a lead and develop green and new innovative technologies that we know will be needed. Of course, right now, this is a temporary setback, but in the long term, we know where the world is heading, what we need to do, and those who develop the new technologies will be the long-term winners.
Yeah, I will just add points from Björn points. So I think the tariffs from the carbon market perspective is going to disrupt and giving us the short-term pressures where the government will deprioritize the environmental investment, meaning the green project is going to be has less attention compared to the threat shocks that has more essential for the economic growth of the country itself. So that's going to be the short-term pressure, but there's going to be like a long-term opportunity. It's related to diversification. Björn already mentioned it about the BRICS. So it means that when we're talking about carbon market, it's always about like who's going to finance it. Indonesia and the rest of the Asian market, we are like the supplier. Majority of the forests are in Asia, and we have a lot of carbon credit projects. So we need to kind of have a solution to diversify the market. You mentioned about BRICS, so probably we're gonna having like an increased engagement with the BRICS, but also maybe with the Middle Eastern, with China, and the rest, like Europe as well, in order to have an alternative carbon market that gonna support our projects to reduce emission as well as sustainable funds, and also it's gonna be also related to the energy transition projects. So the pressure of energy transition is always coming from the powerful countries. They want us to do energy transition, but with one country, one of the superpower country, basically changing their own policy in terms of the tariff, in terms of like Paris Agreement. So it's gonna also changing about our process of investment in the energy transition project in Indonesia.
Hanh?
Yeah, for Vietnam, I would like to be a bit more specific for the ETS, for example, because you see that for the steel sector, they also export a lot to the US. So they will be, I think, targeted and impacted negatively by the tariff policy of the Trump government. So I think for that, it will impose the potential of the over-allocation for the ETS of Vietnam for the pilot phase, because you can remember the case with the EU ETS in the phase 2, that the crash in the economies and things. So there the over-allocation is result to the drop of the price considerably at that time, and then also like the frozen of the market for quite some time. So this is our concern for the ETS operation in Vietnam in very, let's say, nonsense phase, that we may have no very low volume of the transaction because of the over allocation, and then also the price may be very low, so we don't put the right incentive for the participant to do the dredging mitigation activities. And then for the impact on the carbon credit, I don't see the very strong impact, because honestly, so the buyer of the credit from Vietnam so far is from the Europe and other countries, but not from the US. But I also see that the opportunity, because of the under the time when the US withdraw from the Kyoto Protocol, that we see the higher incentive for the American company to voluntarily conduct and participate in the carbon market. So I hope that this trend can be the case in under the new decision of the US government. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. We have about 5 minutes left. I may just take 1 or 2 more questions. I have one question here for Pera with regards to Indonesia. The person is asking if you are seeing any early signals of regulatory clarity around Indonesia's approach to corresponding adjustments, and whether they might be required for credits used for voluntary purposes.
Okay, so I think the things that I already discussed on the slide is something that has been progressive enough in order to discuss about corresponding adjustment, which means that basically Indonesia already very open and very collaborative to build the mechanism of trading using the mutual recognized agreement. So mutual recognized agreement, like I mentioned, it contains really a very significant points in Indonesia trading, because the first one is gonna be enable the country who have MRA with Indonesia or the standard who have MRA with Indonesia to transfer the carbon credits to achieve each other NDC target. And then second, like I mentioned, it's gonna be doing the corresponding adjustment. So by the time that the government transfer it to Japan, for example, Japan will record it under their national emission, while Indonesia will not record it under their national emission. So it's basically belong to Japan, so there is no double accounting. And then also there is much more integrity and transparency, because it is regulated by the country itself. So they will have much more controls and giving more access to the project that they might think much more has significant in order to reduce the emission in their country. For example, if they want to give more focus on forestry or renewable or agriculture, etc. So that has been really like a very progressive. If you want to know when it's gonna be happening, let's wait until May 2025 with MRA with Pera. But the IDX carbon market basically is the one that's gonna doing all the implementation to transactionally between these two countries, or the agreement between the standards. So we will wait and see by watching the news about the IDX carbon and its implementation for the nature pacts. For the renewable, it has been implemented actually. So renewable energy projects, you can buy it as international entity under IDX carbon. But for the nature based, we're gonna wait and see until several months ahead.
Okay, thank you very much for your detailed response. We have less than 5 minutes to go, and actually I have a closing question that I would like to ask all three speakers. So if there's one concrete action that could make the biggest difference in facilitating the development of carbon markets in the cases that you have presented, what would it be? And what would it take to make it happen? So Björn, I'd like you to talk about Southeast Asia. Hanh, can you talk about Vietnam? And then we'll finish with Pera talking about Indonesia. Yeah, please go ahead, Björn.
Thank you for the question. Very good question. I think there's so many things that needs to be done actually, so it's hard to pick only one, but I think what we are seeing is that demand is still very uncertain, which also means uncertainty of pricing of credits. This is a key concern for all the countries in the region when they are trying to build their national frameworks, because they may not have a correct understanding of different methodologies, different use cases such as CORSIA or NDCs, and how they will be priced, and especially on the forward curve. So I think if I had a magic wand, definitely having understanding of the long-term demand and price signals will help the countries to know where to focus their energy and implement their policies accordingly.
Wow, so Vietnam to pick one, I think is difficult among the number of challenges that I just highlight, but I try to make at least one is the most, let's say, vulnerable topic at the moment is data collection and quality of the data at the moment, because it's related to the transparency and also quality of the decision making of the government. So I think this is a lacking of the good database in Vietnam at the moment to support for the decision making in the develop and operate the domestic carbon market in Vietnam. Yeah.
Thank you so much. From my perspective, this is my personal perspective, so I'm not representing Indonesia basically because Indonesia government has been doing a lot of very good job in terms of lay out the fundamentals of the carbon exchange as well as the standard for Indonesia mechanism of market carbon market. But one thing that I wish it happened is like to run the pilot transaction. If we can at least start with the pilot, where we can transfer the credit internationally, especially with the country who have the bilateral Article 6 agreement like Japan, or maybe we can also working with Switzerland. So it might be gonna be difficult to start it at the beginning, but if we start small, it's gonna be meaningful, meanings that we're gonna learn from the ground. I think from Han and Björn perspective, it's all about capacity. So if we execute and then learn from the ground, we can actually capture the data, the feedback, the risks from the first transactions, and then we can understand the real implementation process and revise and strengthen the system by the time that we are doing the pilots. So we can improve the regulatory framework, we can finalize our best system of corresponding adjustment guidelines, we can also align our own standard with the global registry or international standard and build our capacity in order. One thing for sure is like we want to make sure that this is served the climates and the communities. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's 11:31 now. There are a few other questions, but unfortunately we've run out of time. I would encourage those people who would like to have their questions answered to contact the speakers directly. And we have now come to the end of the seminar. I would like to thank our three speakers for sharing their valuable time and insights. And thank you for our audience for joining us in this seminar. Thanks also to my ISEAS colleagues for making the event possible. And I will now hand the floor back to the MC. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you to all the panelists for a wonderful session, and thank you to the audience for your kind support and active participation. So we received a lot of requests from you for the speakers' presentation slides, so please rest assured that we will seek permission from the speakers to share them with you after the webinar. So thank you so much for your interest. If you would like to be kept informed on activities and events by the Climate Change in Southeast Asia program at ISEAS, please sign up for updates at the link which I have just pasted in the chat box. Thank you so much, and we look forward to seeing you at our next webinar. Have a great day ahead.